I want to begin with a word of welcome to those who may be here at St. Patrick's for the first time, or if you are here visiting with family and friends. We appreciate your presence with us, and really my appreciation to everyone for the decision that you've made, the faith decision you've made to join us as part of a worshiping community this evening. It is kind of like the gospel reading where each of you are responding to a call you kind of got out of your boat to come here, right? That you made that step, took that really next action in your faith. And so I appreciate that. We appreciate that. Here we hear in the first reading this idea from Elijah of the voice of God. So Elijah was seeking God's voice. He was seeking his presence. And a lot of times when we seek that voice, the voice that called you here this evening, we seek that voice or we hear that voice, we are expecting a certain method of revelation from God, right? We're kind of expecting God to be in certain places or certain things. For Elijah, that was a wind, a mighty wind, and then an earthquake, and then the fire. But God wasn't in any of those things. Instead, God was in the tiny whispering sound. Everybody say tiny whispering sound. In the tiny whispering sound of God's voice. That's the voice that speaks in our hearts. That's the voice that speaks inside of each of our consciences. That's the voice we respond to in relationship with God. That happens for all of us regularly, but it's tiny and whispering, right? We have to make some space intentionally in our lives to hear it. Instead of all the distraction by entertainment or busy schedules or the whole myriad of things that go on in our lives, the challenges and the storms like in the gospel reading, we still have to make room to listen to God's voice, to seek it, to give us sometimes, maybe it's 2 minutes a day, maybe it's an hour a day, but to get some time to quiet everything down and be able to hear God speak in that tiny whispering sound of his voice in our hearts, right? In the gospel reading, we do hear this story, this beautiful story of Jesus walking on the water and the disciples who are afraid in the boat in the midst of a storm, and they don't know for sure if it's Jesus. But when we hear that voice, right, we are called to place our trust in him, to actually, as Peter says, Lord, if it's you, command me to come across the water. Jesus says one word, come, right? To us, that voice, that tiny whispering sound is always beckoning us to come. Come and follow me. Come to my mercy. Come to my love. Come to all of my grace that I have to give you. Come and be part of my action. Come and be part of my life, right? Come, he says. And we're called to trust in that, to really trust that we are taking the next step, that when God calls to us to come, that we follow him, that we go when he says to come. It's important, though, that when we get to that point, that we recognize the trust that's called out of us is not a trust in a particular outcome, but a trust in a person. It's not a trust in a particular outcome. It's a trust in a person, the person of Jesus Christ. So when we respond to that tiny whispering sound, we're not responding because there is something that we're expecting to happen, right? That we're expecting a certain outcome to occur. We're trusting in the one who walks with us through all of the storms of life. The one who is always present, who never abandons us, who never rejects us, who always joins with us in his people. As we come to this Eucharist, it's always a symbol of that presence of God, a call to us, a step of faith that we each have taken out of our own boats, out of our comfort zones, out of the places where we feel secure, to step out and follow God. Right? To follow him, to hear his voice, and to follow where he leads us. That's led us here this evening. And in this Eucharist, it's the pledge of his presence with us. That the one that we have trusted to take this step, and each step of faith we ever take, journeys along the path with us, nourishes us and strengthens us for that journey. That we come here and we don't receive a particular outcome from this Eucharist, we receive a person into our lives. We receive his body and his blood, the pledge and the gift of the covenant of his love for us. That we come here trusting in Jesus, that he is with us and loves us. Each of us may be going through different storms in our lives right now. Has anybody else had a stormy week? Right? But we're not alone. We don't journey that path by ourselves. God speaks to us in our hearts. He calls to us to get out of our boats, out of our comfort zones, and to place our trust in him, not in some particular outcome. As we come to this place, it is an opportunity for us to lay out our trust in God, to lay out our trust in Jesus, to Jesus who on this day, in this Eucharist, calls to each of us. Come.